Hi friends, this video is going to be going through my GameCube collection. I'm going to go through the console, accessories, and 40 games that I have across a diverse array of genres. Something that we really didn't see a lot of if you watch my Super Nintendo and my N64 videos. You saw a lot of platforming games. You will not see a lot of platforming games today. I want to say that genre kind of fizzled out because platforming was huge in 2D. They tried to make it very popular in a 3D. Made a lot of great games, but they really started to diversify in this generation of consoles. As you can see here, I've got the indigo color of the console, also came in black and a platinum color, silverish. And growing up, I didn't have one of these. I don't think I ever actually saw one. I had a PS2. PS2 had a DVD player, so it was the thing to have. It was the cheapest way at the time to buy a DVD player. Same thing happened on the PS3. It was the cheapest way to get a Blu-ray player. So that is the console that I grew up with. And it makes sense that I didn't see a lot of them, because if you look at the total sales of a PS2 versus the total sales of a GameCube, it just didn't sell a lot, unfortunately, despite having a ton of great games, which we'll get to after we talk about accessories. So you probably saw the Wavebird connector on the front of my GameCube. This is my preferred way to play with the GameCube. The Wavebird still holds up today as a good wireless controller. I think it was the first party wireless controller to come out. Other companies had wireless controllers as third-party accessories, but Nintendo was the first one as a first-party console to put out their own. You, of course, also have the wired first-party controller. This one, of course, matches the console. You can still actually buy first-party Nintendo GameCube controllers. They make them for the Switch with a included adapter. They're very beloved for the Smash community. And if you need that third and fourth controller, just a regular old third-party cheap controller will do. And for those multiplayer sessions, when you're sitting a little further away from the big screen TV, depending on how you're playing, or maybe you just need some more space, these are cheap. Just a controller extension helps you get that little extra room. And speaking of controller extensions, this one is very strange. This is an adapter that allows you to hook your Game Boy Advance up to your GameCube. It's got some various different uses throughout games. Probably the two most popular are going to be for the Pokemon games. So you can transfer Pokemon from the GameCube games to your Game Boy Advance. As well as for a Zelda game that allow you to play with multiple people and use both screens. So you can look down for certain parts of the game and then go back up to the big screen and multiplayer. The crazy thing about that, though, is you need 4 of these. You need 4 Game Boy Advances and a GameCube, of course, and the Zelda game. Kind of crazy to think about that they would put that much effort into something. I'd imagine not a lot of people did this because it didn't really take off, but really cool nonetheless. From a connection standpoint, you probably saw on the back of my GameCube, I have an adapter here. This is the Eon Mark II GCHD. So probably my favorite of the different ones. There's the Carby, which is a cheaper version. There's some other ones that are less reputable, but it has 2 different ports. So on the side here, we have HDMI, which is great because it's outputting a digital signal and then converting it to your TV at 480p. You also can still do an analog signal. So if you wanted to use component cables, you still can, but this isn't the same component cable that the GameCube uses. This is the Wii port. And the reason for that is they're actually attainable. So even from a third-party perspective, on Amazon, this is made by HD Retrovision. It, again, is the Wii port out to component cables. So great for using on your CRT with component cables that way. And lastly, kind of a weird thing to call an accessory, but this is a Wii. So anything that has Wii ports, GameCube ports on the top of your Wii is a GameCube, and you can use it as both. So if you're trying to get into playing GameCube games and you don't have a Wii or a GameCube, might be a good option because you get 2 consoles for 1. And lastly, memory cards. So this is just a third-party one. I only have a couple first-party ones, and I have my Pokemon saves on there, so I keep those on there. I think that might be a better way to longevity-wise keep those saves as opposed to a third-party one, which might not make it. But multiple memory cards, because this is before we really had hard drives. The first console to have a hard drive was the original Xbox. But the PS2 didn't have a hard drive, so it also used memory cards. And then in later generations, we, of course, saw hard drives like we do today, or SSDs, I should say, nowadays. But let's get into the games. So I mentioned this earlier, that there's a very diverse array of GameCube games from a genre perspective compared to previous generations, as they really started to figure out the 3D generations. So I don't have a ton of platforming games. Platforming games are my bread and butter. It's what I grew up on. It's what I love. But I only got 3 platforming games. So of course we've got Mario Sunshine. Super Mario Sunshine is a game that threw a lot of people off. It wasn't your typical game. It wasn't in the Mushroom Kingdom. Mario was on vacation, and it just was different that way. Your villain was different. You had a Shadow Mario, if you will, as a villain. It had water gun mechanics, and you could hover with those water mechanics. I thought it was very cool. Yoshi, for example, spit out juice, which was kind of fun. So not your typical Mario game, but good in its own right. It just needs to be given a chance. Next up, we have Wario World. Wario is a really fun character for me. I really wish Waluigi would get his own game, for example, but that's a whole different conversation. I would say that this had more of a focus on the combat than the platforming. It also had a collectible sense to it where you're trying to get treasure back. If you played the Wario Land games on the Game Boy Advance, Wario's hellbent on treasure, so kind of fits into that universe there. And you have to advance through the game by getting the red diamonds to move about the game. And lastly, from a platforming perspective, we got Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. This is a very strange game. It came from Sega, not a Nintendo game, because as you remember, Sega stopped making consoles with the Dreamcast. So anyway, the concept of this game is you're a kid, you end up getting a chicken suit, and you're rolling around eggs. There's different eggs to catch. You can only do combat when you're rolling an egg. You move faster when you're rolling an egg. There's, I think, 70-some different eggs in the game, and you collect them, you grow them, you hatch them. Very different game, but still a very cool game. This next category of games I would call real-time strategy and RPGs. So we've got the Pikmin series, Pikmin 1 and 2. So Pikmin is a very interesting series that I haven't spent a ton of time in, but Pikmin 4 is coming out. I'm really looking forward to getting into this a little bit more and get through all the games and complete them. These Pikmin 1 and 2 games also came out on the Wii. They redid the games and put them with motion controls. So if you're interested in playing the games but can't necessarily afford the GameCube versions, or you just have a Wii and you want to play that way, that's another option as well. But from the first game, the Pikmin perspective, you're crash landing, you've got 30 days to escape, and there's 3 different Pikmin colors, they have different abilities, and there's actually multiple endings to this game. Next up, for Pikmin 2, it did change the game a little bit. One of the criticisms of the first game is that the game was timed in a cycle that way. Like I mentioned, you've got escape in 30 days. So they added a couple more Pikmin types and really let you play the game as opposed to forcing you on that time schedule. One thing that I really appreciate about platforming games is how they've gone the route of not being timed anymore. So that's why I always love Yoshi games, because I can take my time, I can explore, I can look for secrets. I'm not worried about you have 300 seconds, for example, to complete a level. Moving from the RTS into the RPG section, I already mentioned these games. These are the only 2 games that I have ever 100% completed. So we've got Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon Gale of Darkness. I think that they're both great, and you should play them both. I would say, though, that Pokemon Coliseum has a better story. Pokemon Gale of Darkness has a better battle system. So it's all double battles. You will play through that way. And you're not catching Pokemon in the wild for the most part. There is a slight mechanic in Gale of Darkness where you are able to catch some wild Pokemon, but it's very limited. You're actually snagging, is what they call it, Pokemon from your enemies that way. So I love these games. I think they're great. I wish they would revisit this series. The reason I 100% of these games is not your typical reason. Both games have bonuses of legendary Pokemon when you 100% complete the game. So from a Coliseum perspective, you've got Ho-Oh, and from a Gale of Darkness perspective, you've got Lugia, as you can see on the cover art. So the other thing that Gale of Darkness did is they made purification easier. In the first game, in Coliseum, it was kind of a chore to purify your Pokemon from Shadow Pokemon to normal, which is necessary. And the other thing that changed in Gale of Darkness that makes the battle system better is they diversified the Shadow moves, almost to give type advantages in a way, and it made the game a little more, gave the game a little more depth, I would say that way. And lastly, from an RPG perspective, we have Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. This is probably the most beloved of all of the Paper Mario RPG games. Unfortunately, it's also the most expensive, probably, of those games. GameCube games kind of have that problem in general. But in this game, of course, Peach is captured. And the interesting thing about this game is there's treasure to be found, which is always exciting from thinking about your little kid's perspective of treasure and the allure of going after and finding treasure that way. So this game builds a lot upon what was great on the N64 game. And really, the games haven't been as great as they were in the GameCube era from Paper Mario standpoint. Moving on to the Zelda games. The GameCube had a lot of Zelda games. If you really narrow it down, it only had 4, but if you, only had 3 core games, but there are 5 different cases of Zelda games. One of them is really not necessary. The first one is the Collector's Edition. So this Collector's Edition gives you the 2 NES games, and it gives you the 2 N64 games. The N64 games don't have the greatest emulation, because really what it is it's running an emulator on the GameCube to play the N64 games. I didn't have any problems. I played Majora's Mask in a playthrough on this and had no issues. But that is what that collection is. The next collection, I'll skip ahead to that one, is the Ocarina of Time Master Quest game. I think what happened here is they had a larger intention for Ocarina of Time and really just couldn't do it on the N64. Master Quest, the second game on here, just makes the game harder. I didn't play through Master Quest, but I did play through the original Ocarina of Time on this. That way. Now I mentioned there are then 3 real GameCube games. Twilight Princess, I think, is a lot of people's favorite Zelda game. I didn't necessarily think that it was my favorite. Favorite Zelda game is a very sensitive subject for all. Mine's Minish Cap. I think I've talked about that before, but I actually did a favorites video and talked about that. What I liked most about Twilight Princess, though, was the end boss battle. I thought that the end battle in this game was better than a lot of the other ones. I feel like each Zelda game has its own perks, and for me, Twilight Princess was the boss battle, the end boss battle. Twilight Princess also came out on Wii, and it also came out an HD version on Wii U. So there's actually 3 different versions you can play this game. I played through on the GameCube because I didn't feel that I wanted to do motion controls, and I also didn't feel that the upgrade for the price and what you get on the Wii U was worth it, as compared to the next title, which is Wind Waker. I did play this through on the Wii U. This game also is available that way. And for me, the upgrades on Wind Waker on the Wii U were worth it. You can get faster sailing by getting an item in the game. And it's the one game that I really enjoyed from a Zelda perspective of doing side quests. I started doing side quests in this game and couldn't even realize I departed from the main quest. A lot of people criticize this game because of the open water side of things and not being in Hyrule that way and just being a different art style. The art style was very controversial when that came out. But also another great Zelda game. I think that most people would say that they are all great, but this one was good as well. And then lastly, one that I haven't spent a ton of time with, admittedly, is Four Swords Adventures. This is the game I was talking about where you can hook up 4 Game Boy Advances and play through that way, and each player is then using their screen at times versus the main screen. Very unique game that way. There's also a Game Boy Advance game with a similar name, and you can notice here that there's 4 different links with 4 different colors. There are some other games, I think even in Minish Cap, there is a mirror ability where you're using another version of you to complete puzzles and use multiple links, if you will. So that's all the Zelda games. The next category I want to talk about is first party, I guess, action adventure games. This game surprised the hell out of me. Luigi's Mansion was incredibly fun. I had a ton of fun on the 3rd one, and I still need to play through the 2nd one on 3DS. But here in Luigi's Mansion, this was a launch title for the GameCube. It is, a haunted mansion that Luigi goes to trying to save Mario. And Luigi is such a unique character. I find the game very appealing from that aspect of it just being um, a very interesting take on Luigi and getting to know his character more. And he's got a flashlight that he's using to stun ghosts, and he has a vacuum that he's using to soak up the ghosts. Highly recommend a playthrough of that. Up next, for first-party games, actually made by Retro Studios, published by Nintendo, we've got the first two Metroid Prime games. Metroid Prime departed from the typical Metroid series of being 2D side-scrolling, and the Metroid Prime series is 3 games so far, and it is the only 3D Metroid games. All other Metroid games are that 2D style. These games also both came out on the Wii. Metroid Prime, of course, got a remaster on the Switch, so if you're looking to play it, that's another way you can do it as well. And it kind of plays like a first-person shooter in that way. One thing this game really saved itself on, I think, is the lock-on system. A lot of games that are first-person shooter-esque from this generation really struggle, at least when you go back and play them, with the controls. It took many generations, I would say even to the PS4 generation, to really master the feel of aiming in first-person shooters. So this game with a lock-on system made it work pretty well. You still got the morphball. It's the only time you really go third-person that way. But like I mentioned, that lock-on is super helpful. The next one here did not come out on the Switch, at least yet. Hopefully it does. I'd love to see all of the Metroid games come out on the Switch, as well as the fourth one. But we're not sure how much time the Switch really has left, so we'll see how that goes. This game actually did have multiplayer, so it's another option there. It's the first time we saw multiplayer in a Metroid game. We did see new weapons come out in this game, and the Echoes aspect of it is 2 parallel dimensions to explore, so that's kind of the gimmick of this game. And you're going back through, but as you go through the 2 different dimensions, things change there. Next up, we have Geist. I think Geist is the first rated M game that Nintendo ever put out. This game was actually developed by N-Space and published by Nintendo, but from a publisher's perspective, they've only done 3 ever, 2 on the GameCube, which you'll see next. But this game is really, really cool, and I feel like people don't give it enough time and realize it for what it is. In this game, you essentially die and you are possessing things to progress through the levels, doing different puzzles. You're possessing different people, you're possessing different objects, you're possessing different animals, and you're controlling them to get through and solve different puzzles, get through, eliminate different enemies. You know, you have weapons, of course, when you possess different people, things like that. And I didn't think this game was going to be as good as it ended up being. And some of the puzzles did get pretty confusing, and I guess that's kind of why people may have not enjoyed it as much or may have stopped played it, but highly recommend this game. Very fun. Next up, we got Eternal Darkness, rated M, as you can see. This game, developed by Silicon Knights, published by Nintendo. That M on here, of course, makes it one of 3, like I said. I believe there's 1 game on the Switch that is a Nintendo game that's rated. Might actually be Bayonetta, now that I think about it. Bayonetta 3. But in Eternal Darkness, you've got a third-person game. You've got different characters throughout time that you're following, different combat mechanics, and this game, I believe, patented the sanity meter, so the game will mess with you. Kind of breaking the 4th wall in a way. And going through and messing it's most known for, this never happened to me in my playthrough, but the deletion of save file, tricking you that way, and really kind of changing the game as your character starts to go insane, and things in the game just breaking down with blood on the screen, whatever it may be, twisting the screen so you're kind of getting vertigo that way, just really messing with your sanity. And the last one for, I would say, first party would be Star Fox Adventures. I believe this is the last game that Rare did for Nintendo. And I think this game also was intended to be a different game, and then they put the Star Fox universe into the game. This game, like I said, is third person. It's kind of like a Zelda game. So you're going through and you're spending a lot of time on foot. So you have different time spent in spaceships, for example, versus being on foot. And you have to progress through the game and get new skills. It also has that on-rail shooter element of Star Fox where you're going planet to planet. So next up for the action adventure games are the third-party titles, and we'll go through this one a little more quickly. We've got the three Prince of Persia games. So first up in the trilogy, Sands of Time. This is the one that I love. I've played this game on 3 different consoles. I've played it on PC, I've played it on PS2, and I've played it on GameCube. This is the best version, I think. They have been talking and delaying indefinitely a remake. I hope that game does get remade. Very, very good game. The next 2 games in the series didn't really do all that well. We've got Warrior Within, and we've got Two Thrones. The cool thing about Sands of Time, you've got some unique platforming elements, and you've got the time mechanic to be able to rewind time if you make a mistake that way. But the Warrior Within game was a little more non-linear, and you had to do some backtracking, so it didn't really do as well that way. It had a darker theme than Sands of Time, so people didn't get the same vibe from it. It seemed like a different game, even though these 3 are kind of in a trilogy, and they all fall very similarly in that same universe. This also did have a trilogy that came out on the PS3, as you could buy in a pack that way. However, something is really wrong with the audio on the PS3 HD trilogy, so I wouldn't recommend it. I actually tried playing through it and just had to stop because the audio was so distracting. And then the third one, the Two Thrones. This game I feel like was a little better. In this one, the prince had a split personality, so that's where the Two Thrones names come from. They did improve some of the mechanics of how you parkour around, and jumping off walls and things like that was a little better in that game. The other 2 games that we have from an action-adventure standpoint that are third-party would be the 2 Bomberman games. I think that the better of the 2 is Bomberman Generations. Bomberman Generations was made by a different studio. They're both published by Majesco, but Bomberman Generation was developed by Game Arts versus Jetters was developed by Hudson Soft. So they're both similar in the way. However, Bomberman Generation, an exclusive game to the GameCube. Bomberman Jetters is available on other platforms. I think it's on PS2 as well. The weird thing about Bomberman Jetters is the PS2 version is a different art style. So the GameCube version is cel-shaded, and I think it holds up better that way. Similarly with Wind Waker, how that game holds up with that cel-shading art style, Bomberman Jetters has that same art style. You're exploring the game in these, you're solving puzzles, you're getting different abilities to have more bombs, things like that. And yeah, just basically going through and solving puzzles that way. Next up, we have racing games. So we've got 7 racing games or so here. So we'll start off with Mario Kart. Double Dash, I wish this game would come to the Switch in some form. Whether it be a mode in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but something to give us that multiplayer same kart experience. So if you're playing this game by yourself, you can switch the 2 characters. If you're playing with someone else, they can be on the kart with you. So I've never actually experienced that. I've only ever played this game by myself, but that's again why I would love to see it come to the Switch, either as a mode in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or just as, another Mario Kart game. Something for us to enjoy. And I think this was actually the last game to include a speedometer on the screen. I think in Mario Kart 7 and 8, they just completely removed the speedometer. Next up, we have Wave Race Blue Storm. This is the last time we saw the Wave Race series, which started on the Game Boy, then came over to the N64. This game, just like the N64 game, very stunning from a graphical perspective. The physics for the waves are very, very impressive that way. This was also a launch title, and as you're racing through this game, you're passing through buoys, and whether they're red or yellow depends what side you have to go on, and doing that correctly gives you a speed boost. Also, I think doing tricks gives you a speed boost, so that's how you can get some skill advantage, if you will, through the game. Next up, we have the 2 Burnout games that came out on the GameCube, Burnout 1 and then Burnout 2 Point of Impact. These games I love. I think my favorite in the Burnout series is, I think it's Burnout Revenge. It's a game that came out on Xbox, but then it also came out on Xbox 360, so like had an HD kind of facelift, and that's the only console of that generation it came out on. But the Burnout series is great. These ones, the reason I have them on GameCube is because they're progressive scan. One thing I haven't really talked about is progressive scan versus non. And the progressive scan games always look better, especially when you're upgrading to HD. So for these, they're fast-paced games. They're very well known for their cinematic crashes. Highly recommend these games from the whole Burnout series. I think Burnout Paradise is probably not one to get into if you're looking for that, but still a good game. That game's almost everywhere as well. Next up, the game that everybody wants to see on the Switch is FZero GX. So this is your futuristic high-speed racing games, really the pinnacle of the series. I think that the Super Nintendo game is beloved in its own way. Mode 7 was very interesting then. The N64 version for FZero, FZero X, was 60 frames per second, which was amazing at the time. This game, you could put it on the Switch with no graphical upgrades, and it'll look amazing. It doesn't need much. It was very well done at the time. This game, again, was made by Sega. They did a very good job on that as well. And next up, we have 1080 Avalanche. This isn't your typical snowboard game where it's all about the tricks. This game is all about racing. So get down the hill as fast as you can. Actually, kind of a challenging game, but there's not a lot of stunts to be done. There's unique boards per rider. Fun game that way. Cell Damage. This game is more of a combat racing game. This game did get an HD version, but it's digital only. So still hanging on to my physical version of this. But that game did come out in HD. It's kind of it built its own universe. It kind of reminds me of Wacky Racers, if you know what that is. So it's got cel-shaded graphics, combat racing. The theme is how there's a show in the game, and it's kind of a spin-off of that. Very interesting concept for a game. Next up, we got shooter games. Only got 3. I kind of consider Star Fox Assault more of a shooter game than the adventure side, like I mentioned for the other Star Fox game, for Star Fox Adventures. This one I feel like is a little bit more on-rail shooters. You do have some time on foot on this game as well, but it's more of a rail shooter than I think Star Fox Adventures is more of a Zelda game. This is why I've kind of categorized them differently that way. But for Star Fox Assault, you also have some tank combat, which is fun. So that is a recommended game as well. Metal Arms Glitch the System is next on the list. This game is kind of interesting. There really is no definitive version of this game. I tried to look into the different versions on different platforms, and the best version of this game is actually a ROM hack, if you want to call it that, where they're combining the graphics of one game and the audio of another game, or the textures of one game. I forget exactly how they did it, but they made their own definitive version for people that love this game. This game's really unique. Has a lot of destructible environments, which is really cool. You're basically playing as a robot going after the bad robots. This game is multi-platform again, like I mentioned, but this one is also progressive scan. So something to look for when you're going through GameCube games. Progressive scan games are good to have that way from a graphics perspective. Piano 3, made by Capcom. This is part of, I think, what they call the Capcom 5, where Capcom was supposed to make 5 GameCube exclusive games, and this is one of them. This game's really interesting. It kind of reminds me of like a rhythm on-rail shooter, but essentially like you can't move and shoot at the same time. So you have to dodge and then shoot. Very interesting game. It's almost like the character's dancing as you go through it, so people like it for that reason. And then the last category I have is just everything else. So I've got 6 more games here. So we've got Beautiful Joe 1 and 2. These games kind of hurt my eyes a little bit, like the flickering, because it's the concept of the game is you go into the movie and you're trying to save your girlfriend in the first one, and the second one you can actually use either character. Your girlfriend becomes part of the game, but the first one's progressive scan and the second one's not. So that kind of bothers me. But other than that, like I said, these are multi-platform games that way. You've got side-scrolling elements there, and you have basically what they would call visual effects powers. Like you think in the movies, they use visual effects. So you're using those kind of powers to attack enemies that way. So you can slow down the movie, you can speed up the movie, that kind of thing. Next up, Super Smash Bros. Melee. This is probably the most beloved of all the Super Smash games. So this game is a fighting game, of course, characters. My favorite thing about the Super Smash Bros. Games is playing through the single player elements, which is really weird. I never was good at the Super Smash Bros. Games, but still enjoy them nonetheless. Next up, we got a couple sports games. So Toadstool, I love all the Mario Golf games. The N64 one is the one I'm trying to play through right now. I deleted the save file and I'm trying to read all the characters. But Toadstool Tour is a very good version. And then Super Mario Baseball, I think this is one that I would love to see them revisit that way. But essentially, you're going through a campaign mode and you're trying to beat the other teams and recruit players from those teams to make your team better. Very fun. And last but not least, Tetris Worlds. The reason I have this game is I do love Tetris games, but I also have every single Tetris game released on a Nintendo platform. And I plan to do a completely separate movie on all those Tetris games and just go through kind of the history of Tetris on Nintendo platforms. So that is it. That's 40 games. I intended to go through a little bit more detail on those, but I wanted to speed it up a little bit to get through all the games with you guys. But let me know in the comment section, what are your favorites? Check out my other favorite videos I mentioned. I've done a video on my Super Nintendo collection. I've done a video on my Nintendo 64 collection. I've made a video just on my favorites from every console. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, all that YouTube algorithm stuff. And then in my about section, check out my socials. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But thanks again for watching the video. Have a good one.